On November 15, 1981, I was drafted into the 3rd Brigade, which was stationed in Rivne, Lviv Oblast, Ukraine. I served there until January of the following year, undergoing training and getting used to Army life. At first, I served in an airborne unit, as part of a battalion, where we were put through our paces. Forced marches, obstacle courses, constant drill, and endless training on armored personnel carriers. It was tough for the young soldiers, but we took it all in stride. We understood that we were being prepared not just for barracks life, but for something much more serious. Then, on the night of January 31st to February 1st, the order to fly out came. We were asked to voluntarily agree to be sent, and, of course, I agreed. No one even thought of refusing. Rumors had been circulating in the brigade for a long time that we would be sent to guard the embassy in Kabul. And for young guys, the word Kabul sounded almost like abroad. Pictures formed in our imaginations: a beautiful life, clean streets, pretty girls, a different culture. It seemed like it would be almost like a resort. We dreamed that we would sit in the embassy, watch TV, listen to music, and play the guitar. For us, it was something exotic. After all, it was abroad, not like our gray Soviet life. When we were given the money, there was no question about what to do with it. Some of the soldiers suggested putting it aside for when we were discharged, but most decided it would be better to buy something for the soul to brighten up our service. In the end, we bought a guitar, an accordion, and a record player. The guitar was soon passed on to the DMOB, the record player ended up with the officers, but the accordion became our thing. We had a guy nicknamed Zork, a real virtuoso on the bayan. As soon as there was a screw-up in the unit, he was immediately put on the BMD tower. He spread the bellows and played lively marches, Purum Pam Pam Pam, while we ran circles around the equipment, did exercises, did push-ups, got up again, and ran again. And so on and on. The music played rhythmically, and we turned into a small orchestra of pain and sweat. And the funny thing is that we bought this accordion ourselves and came up with the soundtrack to our torment ourselves. On March 24th, closer to evening, around 10 o'clock, we finally broke camp. We took down the tents, gathered our belongings, and moved towards Marmal. There, our battalion was dispersed and scattered across different points and positions. Part of the unit occupied an old Afghan fortress, while other fighters settled in the surrounding area. From then on, the concept of a permanent location no longer existed for us. We were moved back and forth, depending on the situation and orders. Thus began real combat life. Soon we found ourselves in the infamous valley that everyone called the Valley of Death. Where we were stationed, conditions were particularly difficult. No water, no normal living conditions. We slept right on the armor, and then somehow managed to set up tents. Imagine the heat, the sun beating down mercilessly, the armor so hot you could fry eggs on it, and the 5 of us packed like sardines in a can in a cramped tent stretched out right next to the armored personnel carrier. We said we didn't mind the cramped conditions, but in reality our legs were numb, we couldn't breathe, and sleep was more like torture than rest. Sometimes we had to sleep on the armor itself, our heads on our backpacks, our arms on our machine guns, our legs tucked under us. It was especially difficult when we were caught near Kabul and chased back and forth for a long time. Somewhere in that area, we managed to get to field baths several times. But it was a stretch to call them baths. Sometimes the water was cold as ice, and other times it was boiling hot, burning our skin. It was impossible to tell whether you had washed or not. One time you felt warm, the next time your teeth were chattering from the cold. But even so, it was considered a blessing to be able to wash off the layer of dust and sweat that had been eating into your skin for weeks. The rest of the time, there was only a flask. 1 per day. We used it to drink, wash, brush our teeth, and wipe our hands. So we made do. We poured a little, smeared the dirt with our palms, rubbed our eyes, and pretended we had washed. No one dreamed of cleanliness. The main thing was to have a sip of water left until evening, because thirst in Afghanistan was more painful than hunger. When they moved us further south, life became even harder. Everything there was truly combat-like. I was only 18 at the time, but I was carrying a PKM machine gun with a 100-round magazine attached to it, plus a TT pistol in a holster. I felt armed and dangerous, even though inside I was still just a kid who, not long ago, had wanted nothing more than to go home to my mom and friends. Before each sweep, everything followed the same script. You approach the gate of the village, your heart pounding so hard that your ears ring. You have a grenade in your hands. You bend the pin, pull the ring, and on the count of 1, 2, 3, you throw it inside. An explosion, and that's it, go! You rush in with your squad, and there are those who have already grabbed their automatic weapons, those who are panicking, and those who are running. And you have to be the first, you have to go forward, otherwise your comrades will die. And so I will remember the date of May 13th for the rest of my life. We were part of the 3rd company, and I think the 2nd company was moving alongside us, but we bore the brunt of the load. We were loaded to the brim. In addition to our personal weapons, ammunition pouches, and standard equipment, each of us was also carrying 1 or 2 mortar shells. As a result, our backpacks dug into our shoulders so hard that it felt like our bones were being soldered to our spines with red-hot iron. But we had no choice. This was an operation in Kunar, and everyone understood that we either had to carry everything ourselves or suffer the consequences if we ran out of mines somewhere. We moved along the gorge, and the Kunar Gorge is not a forest ravine. It is huge, long, like an endless cut in the body of a mountain. And side spurs approach it from all sides, steep, narrow, treacherous. I think we were on the 3rd or 4th one, I can't say for sure, my memory is blurred, but the image is still clear in my mind. We were walking along the trail, a normal climb, and suddenly there was a sharp ascent, about 50 meters of almost vertical wall. The trail ran along bare rock, smooth as glass, as if water had been flowing down this channel for centuries, washing away everything superfluous. Every step was like walking on ice. One false move and you would roll downhill, along with your mines, your machine gun, and your fate. And then, as we were climbing this slope, a group of ghosts appeared on the opposite slope, at least 20 of them. They were clearly visible, as if on the palm of your hand. They walked calmly, confidently, as if they were the masters of this land. Our commander, still young and hot-headed, asked the interpreter how to shout, "Stop," in Afghan. The interpreter said, "DRI," and he shouted it. But the ghosts only froze for a moment, then immediately scattered, as if dissolving into the rocks, and all hell broke loose. Fire rained down instantly, tracers cut through the air, and the rocks around us were shattered into dust. We lay down and took up positions wherever we could. The senior sergeant, I think his name was Mark, nicknamed Mahala, was in front. He had been warned, "You, Mahala, button up, don't show yourself." He just smiled and said, "No bullet has ever hit me yet." And at that moment, as if fate itself had heard his bravado, a bullet entered his chest, between his cargo pockets. He fell immediately, without even uttering a word. This scene is etched in my memory as if it all happened in slow motion. We began to fight back, covering each other, trying to prevent the spirits from entering from the flanks. At that moment, I was climbing down the rocks, my foot in the air, when suddenly I felt a blow to my finger, as if someone had struck it with a red-hot iron. I fell, hit the ground, rolled over the rocks, and had only one thought in my head: "That's it, this is the end." I screamed because I was truly terrified. Neither training nor the stories of veteran soldiers prepare you for the moment when you realize that death is right there, close by. I began to frantically search for the first aid kit, my fingers trembling, the cartridges clinking in the magazine. At that moment, the company medic jumped down, threw me a bandage pack, and shouted something encouraging. I rolled back behind a rock, pressed the bandage to my chest, and immediately there was another explosion nearby. Bang! Shrapnel flew in all directions, and my leg was blown apart, not to shreds, but the pain was so intense that it felt like my bone had been twisted with a red-hot crowbar. I jumped from the impact, and nearby another of our guys jumped under a large boulder, trying to hide. I saw the bullet graze him. It entered from the side and exited just above, tearing his arm to shreds. Blood spurted, his fingers hung limply. I rushed to him, helped him tie a tourniquet, bandaged him up as best we could, then carried him down the path. But that was only the beginning. Fire was coming from all sides. Rocks were cracking, dust was rising like a wall. It seemed as if the mountain itself was spitting lead. It was the first time we had been in such serious trouble. crossfire, an ambush, no way out without casualties. You couldn't imagine anything worse. They were firing from above, throwing grenades from the side, and we were down below, trapped like rats in a bag. At that moment, my second-in-command, a demobilized soldier, called out to me, "Come here." We moved to a hollow, something like a small valley or a little pocket between the slopes. He set up his bipod, laid out the machine gun, and I stood next to him. And then two ghosts appeared along the slope. He, Kushikov, said, "Look carefully." I took aim at them, my heart pounding so hard that the front sight was jumping. I fired a short burst, but, as I later realized, I hadn't calculated the lead. One fell immediately, the second twitched, stopped, hesitated, and then rushed up the hill. I took aim again, but apparently my trembling or the dust knocked my sights off, and he got away. I still wonder whether I didn't get him in my sights properly or whether I didn't pull the trigger hard enough. The shooting continued without interruption. Rocks rained down from above, and screams were interspersed with bursts of gunfire. After the battle, they said that we had killed at least 10 people and wounded about a dozen more. But at what cost? Our second group also came under fire. The battalion commander, a captain, had just risen from cover when someone shouted to him, "Comrade Captain, put on your helmet." He waved his hand and said, "What kind of paratrooper wears a helmet?" At that moment, a shot rang out and a bullet blew his head off. He flew away, and we remained in the mountains until morning, wandering like shadows, tired but focused, because we couldn't relax. Then the helicopters came back and took him away, and we breathed a sigh of relief. I remember the date very clearly, May 1st. That date is still etched in my memory because that's when it all happened. That's when we understood what real combat was. It was the first truly large-scale, serious battle, not a raid on villages, not a sweep of barns or a search for weapons in houses, but real hell, when the earth shakes and bullets buzz past your ears so that it feels like you have a whole swarm of bees in your head. Before that, we also had assignments. We went to villages, checked on the locals, pulled out those who were trying to hide or help the enemy. But all that seemed like child's play compared to what happened then in the gorge. There, for the first time, we felt what it was like to be in real danger, when the lives of your neighbors and your own depended on your actions. After that battle, nothing else was so scary anymore. Everything was perceived differently, even though the service continued, and there were many more shootings and ambushes. During my entire service, I was involved in 3 major battles. I especially remember the Oselto Buri. Their huge warehouses were located not far from our positions. It was an entire supply base for the spirits, and every 6 months we were sent there to clean it up. Each time we returned with trophies. We carried so many weapons that the trucks were bent under the weight. Automatic rifles, machine guns, ammunition, grenade launchers, there was everything. Sometimes we came across models that even we in the Soviet Union did not have in our arsenal. The place was cleverly designed. On our side, the entrance to the gorge was blocked by 2 high mountains, like a gate. The Afghans knew this and took advantage of the fact that the gorge descended further down towards Pakistan. Everything was open there, and planes from Pakistan flew calmly right over the gorge and dropped cargo, weapons, ammunition, food. The enemy carried everything away in a matter of hours. We watched and understood that this was a constant flow of supplies, and it was impossible to cut it off completely. Our helicopters tried to get them from the air, but to little avail. The insurgents skillfully placed 2 single, but very well-positioned machine guns on the ridges, and they kept the entire gorge under fire. Our Mi-24s couldn't fly low, it was too dangerous. We had to work from a great height, and accuracy suffered. We could see the flashes of gunfire, but it was rare to hit the machine gun nests accurately. That's how we lived. They covered their warehouses, and we went there again and again to clear them out, burn them down, and carry them away. The last time I was there was on December 4th, 1981. It was a battalion operation, a serious one, planned in advance. We marched in tight formation, with vehicles providing cover and helicopters overhead. But even with all that, it felt like we were walking into the jaws of a monster. And, of course, even in such circumstances, we didn't lose our sense of humor. The soldiers always found a reason to laugh. Someone would fall into a ditch, or the spirits from the mountains would shout curses at us, and we would sing songs in response. It was especially fun when we were guarding the airfield. It was a special time there in its own way. We were standing at the edge of the outpost, fenced in by barbed wire, with mountains behind us and a desert pass ahead. Only a couple of vehicles were on duty that day, the platoon was resting, some of the men were preparing for leave, and we were essentially left to our own devices. Boredom is a terrible thing, so when an opportunity to have a little fun came along, no one objected. We loaded our course machine gun with a full belt of tracers and, just for fun, turned it as far as the sector allowed and fired the entire burst into the white light. The night was immediately lit up by a long arc of fire, as if the sky had been torn apart by fireflies. We hit the roof of the nearest hut, which caught fire, but the local owner managed to extinguish the flames. In the morning, this old man came to us himself, as if nothing had happened. He lived not far from our positions, on the pass itself. He was one-armed, with a family, a simple Afghan peasant, but incredibly cunning and full of life. Smiling his toothless smile, he began to tell us, "Bang bang, at night I had a fire there, Karab, the house was ruined." But he didn't seem to hold a grudge. On the contrary, he offered us bubalo bayabu, that is, a couple of watermelons and some flatbread. He was always bringing us something, watermelons, grapes, or some other fruit. Of course, we had enough supplies as it was, but it was still nice. His hospitality seemed sincere. We didn't remain in debt. We gave him a couple of cans of canned food, some black bread, some diesel fuel for his kerosene stove. Sometimes he even asked for bullet casings after shooting, saying that they could be used for something on the farm. And so a strange friendship began between us. He was a local, living among the mountains and alls, and we were strangers in uniform who had come with weapons. But we found a common language. I was particularly amused by how he taught me Farsi. I would visit him at his house, a low, clay building with a flat roof, where bundles of herbs and animal skins were drying, sit down next to him on a mat, and we would begin our lessons. I would show him, for example, a mug, and he would say the word in Farsi, and I would repeat it. Then he would point his finger at an object and ask me in Russian, "How do you say this?" We could sit like this for an hour, or even an hour and a half. Sometimes he would laugh at me when I mixed up the stress or said something funny. And I, in turn, would laugh when he tried to repeat Russian words and came out with something completely absurd. When I returned to my people, the men immediately gathered around, some for tea, some just to listen. They laughed. "Come on, show us what the old man taught you." I began to reel off my new words, some joked, some were surprised. As a result, these lessons turned into a small event at the outpost. Even those who were skeptical at first would later come over and listen. And my grandfather always walked me to the gate, patted me on the shoulder with his only arm, and repeated, "Shuravi is good." Moments like these brightened up the harsh life in Afghanistan. It seemed like war, shooting, and death were always nearby, but suddenly, a simple conversation with a local who shares a watermelon and laughs at your pronunciation. We were standing in the commandant's office in Loba. If memory serves, it was 1981, mid-May. It was a time when the sun was already very hot, but the nights were still cool. For us, it was perhaps the most peaceful and satisfying time of our entire service. We enjoyed ourselves in Loba for almost a month and a half. We didn't live in dust and dirt like in the mountains, but under a roof. We slept on real beds indoors, and if there weren't enough places, we slept in tents. It seemed like luxury. Instead of rocks under our backs, we had mattresses. Instead of mess kits on our knees, we had a separate dining room with spoons, bowls, and even, God forgive me, towels. After constant marches and operations, such conditions seemed like paradise. The town was small but cozy. The main street stretched straight to the commandant's office gate, and parallel to it were narrow streets where children and women in headscarves wandered. We got used to these scenes, the noise of the bazaar, the smell of spices, the cries of merchants, the barking of dogs. All this strangely mixed with military discipline and patrols. Life seemed to be going on as usual, and we felt that we had become part of this city for a while. And then one day, a senior captain of the Afghan army came running up to us. A small, thin man, but always armed and with eyes burning like coals. He ran up excitedly and almost shouted, "There! In the kindergarten next door! The enemy is sitting there!" At first, we couldn't believe our ears. How could that be, in a kindergarten, where there are children? But the captain insisted, and there was no time to think about it. All of us, about 7 people who were free, without uniforms or assignments, grabbed our automatic weapons and ran there. Our hearts were pounding, but our legs carried us. We ran into the kindergarten grounds, and there he was, a burly man. A fire was smoldering in front of him, as if he had come here to relax. It was obvious to the naked eye that he was not a local civilian, but a real militant. We went in a chain, each of us taking turns hitting him with the butt of our rifle or our boot, wherever we could. He struggled and swore, but he couldn't do anything against 7 soldiers. We knocked him down, tied him up, and held him until the Randovea group arrived. Then we officially processed him and sorted everything out. It turned out that he was in a gang, today with the Dukans, tomorrow with the Randos, local police, and so on, spending his whole life caught between 2 fires. And here's the most interesting part. This very militant had some shady dealings with the wife of that same thin Afghan captain who ran up to us. He kind of took her away, or tried to. In short, the officer's honor and pride were hurt. The captain was small and thin and couldn't do anything himself. How could he compete with such a hulk? My cousin, Svetka, wrote, "How are you there? At least send a photo." Well, what did I write back? I wrote, "Sveta, everything's great, everything's fine. The sun is shining, there are tangerines, oranges, grapes. It's paradise here, in a word. The food is amazing." Of course, I embellished a little so she wouldn't worry. In war, you never write the whole truth. Not about the shooting, not about the losses, not about the fact that you sometimes live in filth and cold. You always have to write to your loved ones that everything is fine, so they can sleep peacefully at home. I even added, "I haven't been to Lenin's for a long time, but as soon as I get out, I'll definitely go there, take a photo, and send it to you." I wanted to show that life was peaceful, as if we were here on some kind of distant study trip, and not in Afghanistan. I wrote to my mother too. But here's the problem. For a whole year, my letters didn't reach her. They were in Mongolia at the time, and as it turned out, it was not possible to send letters from the active part of the army abroad via field mail. I wrote, carefully put everything in an envelope, signed the address, and they came back via Moscow. At first, I didn't understand what was going on. I thought maybe the post office was losing them, or there was some mistake. And then it dawned on me, censorship, rules. Field mail was filtered, and it didn't go abroad. My mother only found out my real address when she came on vacation to Transcarpathia and registered it. From that moment on, the letters started to arrive. And my first messages from Kabul are a separate story altogether. Half of our battalion sent letters home, but there were no envelopes. No shops to buy them, no money, nothing. We sat like school children after class, having somehow managed to get hold of some paper and notebooks. Our political officer said, "Come on, guys, let's do what our grandfathers taught us, fold triangles." And so we wrote. You fold the sheet of paper, bend the corners, and you get that very soldier's triangle. I still remember. I sent one letter to my aunt in Transcarpathia in a triangle, and another to a girl, also in Transcarpathia. You had to write the index at the bottom of the paper and the address and surname at the top. That's all. No stamps, no envelopes. Just a sheet of paper folded into a neat triangle. We sent them off, and, miracle, they arrived. Imagine the scene. Half the battalion sitting in the evening after dinner, some on their knees, some on ammunition boxes, all folding pieces of paper into triangles. Some write to their mothers, others to their girlfriends, some to their friends. And everyone tries to write cheerfully, happily, hiding what is in their hearts. Then, of course, envelopes appeared, and things got easier. But I will remember those first 2 triangle letters for the rest of my life. To be honest, we didn't get many awards. There was no generosity. For example, Dutov received only 1 medal for courage for all his sorties and battles. Muravsky received a badge from the Central Committee of the Komsomol, and that was all. Our commander Pakimov, who carried half a platoon on his shoulders, did not receive a single award, even though he deserved no less. By and large, more awards went to those who had already died or been seriously wounded. They were nominated for the Red Star or the Medal for Combat Merit. As for us, the living, we were most often told, "Well done, you did it," and that was all. Words of praise, but nothing in reality. It felt as if the headquarters believed that if they awarded everyone, the awards would lose their value. I made my last sortie on December 18th, in Kiruk. Compared to others, it was relatively calm there, and it went easily. But I was already feeling unwell. My liver was starting to hurt, and my strength was fading. The guys joked, "Hey Vitya, you're coming down with jaundice, don't drag it out. Go see a doctor, or you'll collapse right in the mountains." As a result, on December 20th or 22, the last group was supposed to leave, but I stayed with the brigade. I walk around the camp, stopping every few steps, short of breath, my eyes yellow. The guys just wave their hands. "You're definitely sick, they'll take you straight to the hospital." I remember going to the doctor, and he just looked at me and immediately understood. Liver, jaundice. Without saying a word, he took out the documents, filled them out, and signed them. Everything was done quickly. The papers were drawn up, the conclusion was written, the troika was drawn up, and that was it. I was home. The list said, "Discharged due to health reasons." Jaundice was rampant among us back then. Dozens of guys went through it. Some got sick twice in a row. There were cases like that too. The body simply couldn't withstand this life. Constant malnutrition, dirt, stress, water from irrigation ditches, heat during the day and cold at night. They gave me a month's leave, and then I was back in the ranks. Well, before leaving, we got together with our guys, as usual. We sat in the guardhouse until morning, drinking tea, smoking, talking about everything, about the service, about home, about what everyone would do when they returned. In the morning, when they started to get me ready for the trip, the guys chipped in with whatever they could, a towel, soap, socks. It was our little ritual, to gather everything the retiree needed so he wouldn't leave empty-handed. I remember sitting in the copter, getting ready, when Vasiliev, our joker and merry fellow, opened his briefcase, and there were 5 of them. And not rubles, not a pack of cigarettes, but real F1 grenades. Just imagine the scene. We're sitting there in the evening, and Vasiliev, the sly fox, takes his trophy set out of his briefcase. The fuses separately, the casings separately, everything neatly wrapped in cloth and laid out, as if he were carrying not combat grenades, but an English tea set. He even put the trophy knife there, collecting everything as if he were going home not from war, but from a souvenir fair. I look at him and think, what a dilemma. He wants to bring back a souvenir, but he's afraid that if he gets caught during a search, he'll be done for. He's not bringing home a grenade, but a noose around his neck. He egged me on. "Don't be afraid, brother, they won't search us. You'll show it to your friends at home, as a souvenir." And I understood inside that, of course, I could take the risk, but was it worth it? At the time, it seemed like maybe it was worth it, but now I remember and think, it's good that I didn't take it. With 7 combat grenades in my pockets, I wouldn't have made it home, but ended up in another, much more secure barracks. It would have been easy to get caught, and it's not certain that they would have let me go back. At 5 in the morning, they loaded us onto the tops, drove us to the checkpoint, and then sent us to Kabul. We spent the night in Kabul, changed trains, and were sent on further, and then it was Samarkand, and from there, home. I returned on January 19, 1982. But I didn't go straight to my unit. I went to the hospital first, because my plank was really leaking and my liver was acting up. If it hadn't been for that, I would have been sent back again, and it's not certain that I would have returned alive. And then life itself pushed me towards change. I didn't want to go round in circles, returning to the brigade again and again. I had seen too much and wanted to avoid too much. And then, as if it were a sign of fate, an opportunity arose. I read an advertisement for recruitment to a polytechnic expedition. It said directly, "Do you want to see the world with your own eyes? Come." So I went. I enrolled in courses at the Belinsky Technical School and submitted an application. The studies began energetically. In January and February, we studied theory, and in March and April, we were back in the field. But now, instead of weapons and grenades, we had instruments, drawings, and equipment. We built traction points, took measurements, and learned to work with maps. And it was amazing. Going out into the field there, I felt free for the first time in a long time. No anxiety, no fighting. You go out, look at the open spaces, work, and forget everything.